how do you think, as a movement, the MAGA movement stands right now?
Yes. Well, I mean, first thing to note, of course, looking at last November, is that we are a majority movement now in the country. So we've gone from being a relatively small but powerful minority voice to the majority of the United States, winning the popular vote, of course, winning every swing state. Okay, now what do we do with that mandate as a movement? And to me, there's two things that were reflected in that cabinet meeting that are most significant so far. Still more to be done, but in terms of current accomplishments, the first is securing the border, which is really amazing. And President Trump did that literally within days, within weeks. The border was secured. He proved that we didn't need new laws. We needed law enforcement in this country. We needed the diligence and focus of a commander-in-chief who wants to protect the United States from dangerous illegals wholesale invading our country. So it's amazing that the border has already been secure. But then the second thing is deregulation. And that doesn't get quite as much attention, I think, as the border, because it's a more of a moving target. It's not just sort of one, you can't put your finger on just one statistic alone to talk about deregulation. But these cabinet members, thankfully, within their agencies have been so aggressive at deregulating. It's something that Trump did very well in the first term, but it's now on steroids in this second term.
All right, guys, another epic week. That cabinet meeting just continues to pay dividends. I was so excited to hear individually each one of them talk about what they're doing in their space. And it's kind of funny. If you stop and think about it, you'll realize, like, most presidents do this over 4 years. In 6 months, each one of these individuals has accomplished a great deal for us, the American people. That's what the president talked about. And I kind of reflected on that, because it's like you forget sometimes, because we move at Trump speed, how much is actually happening and how many deals are being cut and how many results are being put on the board. So I want to get into that with the panel today. Tomorrow, you guys have asked for it. It's been a big scheduling hubbub, my people with his people, but Victor Davis Hanson is tomorrow. I'm excited for this conversation. He never disappoints. His people, my people. We had a whole confab. It was really interesting. We got swag, we got shirts. I'm just kidding. But tomorrow, looking forward to a great discussion with him. And then next week, one of the authors of that new Biden book about the decline is going to join us. So a lot to get to. Before I get to the panel, though, the weekend is upon us. What does the weekend mean? It's time to get out on the grill. That's what I do anyway. Omelets on the weekend in the morning and then grilling on the weekend. And there's nothing better to kick off your weekend than some amazing steaks from Riverbend Ranch. I love these things. I literally got the most rave reviews the other night when I cooked the Riverbend Ranch steaks for my family. They are amazing. No anti-growth hormones, no any of that bad stuff. This stuff is amazing beef. Over 35 years, they have perfected the marbling, the tenderness that will make you the hit of your backyard. Literally, my family was like, where'd you get these things? Because I love other people's expense accounts and having a great steak. These were better than any restaurant that I've been to. I had the hot dogs too. I know some people are not big hot dog people. My kids are. I crushed it, and I had two myself. I was hungry. Don't judge me, but I love the hot dogs. And then the guys at Riverbend Ranch said, hey, have you tried the beef jerky and the sticks? I did that too. These are amazing. I love this, and you can't buy these things in any grocery store. They come from ranches in Montana and Wyoming right to you, from the ranch to you. You can't get it in a restaurant, it's directly to your home. Much better pricing and a much better product, much better tasting. The steaks and all that are aged up to 21 days. Use promo code Sean, SEAN, when you go to riverbendranch.com. Use code word Sean, $20 off your first order. I recommend, they've got this cowboy subscription model where you get some of the fillets, the strips, and the ribeye. That's what I've been doing, because I'm telling you, I can't go without them. And it's like choosing between your children. The ribeye to me and the New York strip are amazing. Anyway, riverbendranch.com. Use code word Sean. Before we get to the panel, though, I got to tell you about my other great buddy, Leo Grillo. If you guys remember, if you've been watching the show for a while, you know who Leo is. He's the founder of Delta Rescue. This is a guy who took his love for animals to an all-new level. He founded Delta Rescue, and if you go to deltarescue.org, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. He has created the world's largest no-kill sanctuary, not a shelter. He schooled me on that at the beginning. I was like, oh, Leo, I rescued 3 dogs. He's like, yeah, good for you. I created the world's largest no-kill sanctuary, Sean. I'm not looking to adopt pets. I'm looking to take care of malnutrition, abused, neglected animals, dogs, cats, horses. He does it all. You go to deltarescue.org, check out the videos. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. The thing is, Delta Rescue relies on contributions from people like me and you. They don't have any USAID grants or Politico Pro subscriptions funding them. I made a personal donation to Delta Rescue because I believe in the mission of what Leo is trying to do. So go to deltarescue.org, try looking at some of these videos and seeing the great work that he's done. Please consider a donation. And if you get some time, go to the estate planning pull down. If you've got an old 401k or stock that you're thinking about making part of your estate, your financial planner can talk to you about how maybe you can get a tax benefit now and help the mission of Delta Rescue endure for years and generations to come. Please support deltarescue.org and my buddy Leo Grillo over there. All right, it is time to bring in our Thursday all-star panel, our longtime buddy and former colleague from Newsmax, the founder of the League of American Workers from the Trump campaign 2020, and the maker of all kind of cool documentaries, the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Steve Cortez, my former colleague from Newsmax as well, the host of a great show over there, and now the leader of media relations there at America First Policy Institute, our good friend Jen Pellegrino. And rounding out the team on the Thursday, our good friend Caroline Downey at the National Review, a senior fellow, by the way, at the Independent Women's Forum as well. Good to see you all. As I led in the beginning, and I'll start with you, Steve, you were on the campaign in 2020. President Trump has promised a lot. And when I was listening to this cabinet meeting, it got me thinking the context of MAGA. The movement has been promised a lot. And I was thinking about everything that he has been delivered on. All of these different things. And I go, I read the comments online of people sometimes they go, we need to do more. And I agree, you can never rest. But at the same time, we do need to take stock of our wins. How do you think as a movement, the MAGA movement stands right now?
Yes. Well, I mean, first thing to note, of course, looking at last November, is that we are a majority movement now in the country. So we've gone from being a relatively small but powerful minority voice to the majority of the United States, winning the popular vote, of course, winning every swing state. Okay, now what do we do with that mandate as a movement? And to me, there's two things that were reflected in that cabinet meeting that are most significant so far. Still more to be done, but in terms of current accomplishments, the first is securing the border, which is really amazing. And President Trump did that literally within days, within weeks. The border was secured. He proved that we didn't need new laws. We needed law enforcement in this country. We needed the diligence and focus of a commander-in-chief who wants to protect the United States from dangerous illegals wholesale invading our country. So it's amazing that the border has already been secured. But then the second thing is deregulation. And that doesn't get quite as much attention, I think, as the border, because it's more of a moving target. It's not just one, you can't put your finger on just one statistic alone to talk about deregulation. But these cabinet members, thankfully, within their agencies have been so aggressive at deregulating. It's something that Trump did very well in the first term, but it's now on steroids in this second term. And the benefits there are going to be so material to this country, so material to small business particularly, which struggles so much with the regulatory overhang of the Leviathan federal government that is being relieved from the American economy. And granted, it takes some time to see the full benefits of that, but I believe in the months and years and even decades ahead, the benefits to the American people of deregulation, it's just going to be incredible.
Caroline Downey, most politicians come back after an election and give you a bunch of excuses about, I worked really hard, but the Senate didn't do this and I couldn't get this done. What do you give President Trump as a grade in terms of the promises made to specifically the MAGA movement and where it is now?
That's a trick question because we've seen the.
I didn't mean to. That wasn't what I was trying to. How is it a trick question?
Only because the factions of MAGA have become really obvious and evident only in the last month, I'd say, especially with regards to foreign policy. But still, I think MAGA is far more cohesive still, even with the Iran conflict, even with Israel, even with Ukraine and Russia, than maybe some of the foreign policy hawks and doves are acting. Because when you look at how Trump acted to strike the nuclear facilities in Iran, I firmly believe, and I know from his historical record, that was very consistent with his America First platform. He's always said for 10 years, and J.D. Vance said this, that you cannot have a nuclear ascendant Iran and have America first and really have a predominant America on the international stage with this specter of a maniacal regime that's very dictatorial, that very much has a death wish for themselves and the entire country. They just were not they were not compatible. And so Trump, I believe, was following through on his pledge for a long time to neuter that regime so that America could be on top. So there's that. But there were plenty of dissenters in MAGA about whether he should have intervened or not. I think he really proved that he is an amazing military tactician. He's an amazing, I think, like foreign policy strategist in the sense that he seems to have nipped this in the bud. Obviously, we don't know how this is going to play out in the next couple of years, but he seems to have taken care of the problem, the immediate objective, which was their nuclear armament, without it escalating into a broader quagmire, which is all that the isolationists, right? And granted, I don't think they deserve that as like an epithet, because that really was his base. The Trump base said, we don't want any foreign wars. I'm Gen Z. We said no deployments, no drafting. We don't want any of that. And Trump hasn't led us down that rabbit hole. So I think he really killed a lot of birds with one stone. I give him a lot of credit on that. When it comes to the border, this is another area where there's been a couple factions. You have folks like, I would say, National Review, where I come from, where we say, okay, he's doing the best he can given the resistance he's facing in the courts with these crazy injunctions, these, progressive localities that are doing everything in their power to resist, to obstruct, to block ICE, which is in violation of federal law. And he's still, I think, doing deportations at a rate that he relatively promised. However, some would say he's actually behind schedule. And according to the data, he's technically behind Obama from the Obama administration at the rate of deportations. As we know, Obama was the deporter in chief. But I think that, he still has months to go. And I think he got a win at a couple wins at the Supreme Court. And I think Trump is going to accelerate the rate of deportations now. I didn't like the work site raid appeasement. He kind of took a step back on that, because that's kind of the bulk of the problem. If you ask me, it's not just the criminals and the predators and those who were convicted of horrible offenses. It's there's a lot of other people here who came in under Biden, mass imported, that also need to go. Okay.
Well, I want to get into both the foreign policy and the immigration piece in a second. But Jen Pellegrino, you guys at America First Policy Institute, this is what you guys laid out. Here's the agenda. Here's what the president needs to do. Here's the runway that we think, can give him a path forward in a second term. Where do you guys stand on what he has delivered for the MAGA movement?
Well, Sean, I think he's accomplished a lot for the America First movement. It's more than the MAGA movement. It's America First. And I think a lot of people have come on board with that. It's common sense issues and approaches to the problems we had over 4 years of President Biden. It was a nightmare. And you look at all that this President Trump has had to clean up. He's brought in an amazing cabinet, many of whom came from the America First Policy Institute, people that worked together over the years that are extremely loyal to the president and following through on his orders that were the mandate of the American people. These are cabinet members that he has not appointed that are have their own interests that they're bringing to the table. They're really following through with that mandate. Listen, you're going to see in the media focusing on the divide in MAGA. Yes, of course, we're going to have disagreements. That happens. But again, you see a lot of panicans out there, as the president put it. And when you look in the rearview mirror on a number of issues where everybody was going nuclear, President Trump was right in most of these cases. You just had to wait and follow the plan. He obviously understands the art of the deal and understands how to get things done. It may not make sense in the moment. The White House may need to improve on some of their messaging and ensuring that it's clearer to the American people. But I think they're doing a great job. And this is what the majority of Americans wanted. And listen, we may be a little bit clouded, those of us that live in Washington, D.C., but you travel outside of the Beltway and people see it a lot differently than what we consume given the media's approach to it.
All right, Steve Cortez, I want to throw back the ball to you that Caroline brought up on Ukraine. Mm-hmm. And in this context, when a lot of people looked at Iran, they said you either have to go boots on the ground, all in, 50,000, 100,000 troops, or you just have to appease them and let them get a nuclear weapon. And I said this at the time, that I think President Trump knows how to sort of go in with a scalpel and say, nope, we can bomb, we can have an effect. And to me, that was actually the perfect America First, right? We accomplished the mission. There's no follow-on force. Iran is forced to the table. And the problem is the DC has a black or white. You're either all in or you do it this way. And Trump has shown, no, there's a third way. So when it comes to Ukraine, we've heard about this now for 24 hours, that they're now going to send weapons back to Ukraine. Putin has given up. He has made it very clear he doesn't want to work with President Trump. What is the America First strategy, MAGA strategy policy that you think we should be looking at when it comes to Ukraine? And Steve Cortez, I'm going to ask you this. If he keeps supplying Ukraine, does MAGA get pissed?
Well, to answer that last part first, yes, MAGA, I think the patience of MAGA is running very thin, particularly when it comes to Zelensky, who is thoroughly corrupt, not a trustworthy partner, and not a good guy in this fight. That doesn't mean that Putin is a good guy either, obviously. But the American interest has to be what is in our compelling U.S. national security interest. Do we have one in this ancient ethnic Black Sea rivalry in this conflict? I think most of MAGA would argue, and I agree, that we do not, that there is not a compelling American interest. Now, is there a compelling Western European interest? Very likely. And should they be handling what is effectively their neighborhood? Yes, they probably should be, and they should probably be deeply engaged, certainly through support, financial and armed support to Ukraine, if not even with their troops. But again, is it in America's interest? I think if we ask that question, in the cold light of day, we will say no. This just is not in our national interest. We have been enormously committed under the Biden regime to Zelensky, given hundreds of billions of dollars that we do not have, by the way, that we are borrowing to then send over to an incredibly corrupt regime in Ukraine, a government that has not held an election, even though they should, somebody who is not at all an ally of President Trump or of the United States. And so I think we need to start to disengage from Ukraine. And I think most people in America, and I've done polling on this exactly, where if we give the preface that President Trump has brought both of these parties to the table, Moscow and Kyiv, if they cannot come to a peaceful resolution of this conflict, should the United States disengage? 62% of Americans said yes. A super majority of Americans say that we should start to disengage. Among Republicans, you get that number into the 80s. So MAGA has tired of this war, has tired of paying for this war. It's time for those parties to find a peaceful solution. And if they cannot, unfortunately, it's just not our burden.
Jen, do you think that right now that, to Steve's point, I sort of, after Iran, give President Trump the benefit of the doubt of saying, hey, maybe I need to do something provocative to get Putin back to the table. He doesn't seem to think that we're serious about this. And so I'm going to show you the same way I did in Iran, that I'm going to do it my way. And you're going to come back to the table, or I will continue to escalate until you do, because you clearly aren't taking advantage of the opportunities I'm giving you, Mr. Putin.
Well, listen, I would separate the two issues, and I think a lot of Americans can look back on Iran, depending on, regardless of where they were leading up to our actions, and say that President Trump did the right thing here. That was an America First move. But you look at Ukraine, I think back to the early hours of this war, days, weeks. Steve and I were hosting a show back then, and it was wall-to-wall coverage. And America, under the last administration, was all in and having Ukraine's back. And we have been for far too long. And we go back to that Oval Office meeting with President Trump, Zelensky, and Vice President J.D. Vance. And we saw how that played out. And the whole of America was watching that moment. And we saw the lack of gratitude there. We saw how this country was treated after we had provided so much support. And I think that still lives in a lot of people's minds. And especially as we go back to this and saying, listen, President Trump has done all he can multiple times now to try to deliver peace. We don't want to see more bloodshed here, but there comes a point where Americans need to focus on America and not be concerned about a war that we shouldn't likely be involved in.
Caroline, we made, here's the one thing that I would say. We did make commitments to Ukraine, and we said, if you give up your nukes, we'll have your back. And there is that, to me, we've got to figure out where that line is between, maybe that wasn't the right deal to make. Maybe that was stupid. But my point is that does our word matter going forward?
I think it does, but I think Trump has been, just like I said, a great military strategist. I think he knows how these calculations. I think he knows how these calculations can go, but he's also very diplomatic. And I think the thing about Trump is he always pursues diplomatic options before he gets to hard power. So he uses. I think he's kind of blended carrots and sticks, hard power and soft power very well, in a way that even his predecessors, they just weren't that tactful about it. And I think Trump, I've always said, he almost has this there's something unpredictable about everything he does. Like you never know what his next move is going to be. And I think that naturally keeps enemies like Putin at bay. You could even apply that to North Korea and that dictatorship. It's almost like this madman, even though he's not. He's obviously, like, I think, very sound of mind and just very wise. There's something about him that's unpredictable when it comes to foreign policy. And I think that has been a great asset to the United States when it comes to these negotiations. And, with Ukraine and Russia, I just have to reiterate that NATO and those allies and those countries, they need to start paying up more for mutual defense, because we disproportionately cover the cost of that mutual defense. And that's just fundamentally not fair, and it's not America first. And I think Trump's words do matter. I think they hold weight, but we can't be giving everything without any gain. And so I think Trump is going to maximize that.
Caroline, I think you make such an important point there, too, about President Trump, which is that, even when he does decide to engage in military action, as he did in Iran, and not everyone on the right was thrilled about that, but even when he decides on military action, it is always the last resort. Yeah. His default position is peace. And that is incredibly different from his predecessors, both Republicans and Democrat, because Bush, Obama, Biden were more than willing to use the U.S. military, I believe, in a reckless way and to intervene all over the world. We have exactly the opposite approach, thankfully, in this peace President Trump. And Sean, to your point about promises made to Ukraine, I mean, first of all, those promises were in the 1990s. It's 30 years ago. Most of the people who are now serving in the military for the United States weren't even born when some of those pledges were made. I think they were mistakes back then, but regardless of whether or not they were, I still would argue that the onus of, if we, sort of the collective we, if we owe something to Ukraine, the we is primarily Europe, not
right. Well, that
the
goes
United
to Caroline's
States.
Point
It
about
must be the wealthy nations of Western Europe.
Right. I mean, look, that goes to Caroline's point about NATO. I mean, for too long, the deal was, hey, we all agree to certain things and then we'll have each other's back. And the European view was, okay, you guys just pay the tab and then you'll have our back too. And it was like President Trump was like, yeah, no bueno, not a good deal.
I use this example when it comes to what's going on in New York with Mom Downey real quick. So this democratic socialist craze you're seeing on the left right now in the Democratic Party, it's so sad that there is like this distinction between communism and democratic socialism, because they always appeal to the Nordic states, Sweden, Norway, as examples of democratic socialism and how successful it can be. But what they neglect to mention is that NATO and the United States subsidize their defense. That's why they can afford to have these stupid democratic socialist utopias, is because they don't have to foot the bill for the defense.
I tell this all the time, that if we all agree, hey, let's go to lunch on Fridays, and at the end of lunch every time, and Steve Cortez does this every time, he goes, hey, you got the bill, right? And I was like, well, wait, this isn't fair. At some point, we're all going to lunch on my tab, and that's what Europe has been doing for decades. And finally, President Trump said, hey, I like going to lunch with you guys, but this was never the deal. Yeah, I have money. And I think that's the bigger point, is that it's great. You can spend more on healthcare and roads and bridges when you don't have to, live up to the obligations that you have. Jen Pellegrino, there's a couple other issues that I want to get to with respect to MAGA, but the next one is immigration. And I actually believe that this to me is the big one in MAGA world. There's this talk now about that balance, and Caroline was mentioning it. I don't think that there's many people except the far left that don't agree that we need to deport criminals in this country. And then we start this scale of people who broke the law and came into this country illegally, but, well, they're working in this country, and therefore we should give them a path to citizenship. And then there's the DACA, right? And so I think that the one thing that the Trump administration has to be careful on more than anything else is how they handle this issue. People are fed up with the amount of people that illegally came into this country and then got an immediate handout. And I think the American people, the crime, everything else that went with it, have said in that last election, no more. And Trump, I think the one thing that he can hold together almost any coalition, my view is, you screw up on this issue, that's where MAGA really goes nuts.
Listen, I would agree on that. It was a number one issue going into the election. When the America First Policy Institute put out some polling about around the 100-day mark of this second Trump administration, they found that broadly, most Americans were very satisfied above all other issues with the work that this administration was doing as it relates to immigration and our southern border. Now, that said, there has been some messaging conflict. And I think, you look back to our Agriculture Secretary, Brooke Rollins, who came from AFPI, meeting with thousands of farmers right now out there on the ground. She cares so much about our farmers. And there's obviously a lot of concerns there. Listen, you've got about 42% of undocumented workers on farms are undocumented. So there's concern there, I think, about ensuring that our food supply remains stable, that we don't have issues, that we still have a supply of workers. And I think there's been a delicate balance in how the White House's message, how they're going to handle that. Are they going to round everybody up and we're going to have a shortage? But I think now we're hearing from, Caroline Leavitt, from the president, from Secretary Rollins, listen, there's not going to be amnesty. I think early messaging sounded like that was the case. And we saw the party was very concerned about that because it has been such an issue and it has been an all or nothing. President Trump has said, listen, there have been millions of illegal aliens that have come into this country. We're going to get them out of here, starting with the worst of the worst, and going down to everybody else after that. So I think they have to get around the messaging on this, but it seems like they've now corrected course and are moving in the right direction.
Yeah, Steve Cortez, I got to imagine, considering some of the documentaries that League of American Workers have put out, this has got to be an issue that you have your finger on the pulse of very, very dearly.
Yeah, no, very much. And you're right, by the way, it is a worker issue. It matters for national security. It matters for street safety. But I think most of all, it's an economic issue. And thankfully, real wages are surging with President Trump in office, something he did during his first term. And it's happening again now. I think a massive reason is because of immigration enforcement. You don't have these illegals competing unjustly and unlawfully against American workers in the labor market. Why? Because they're self-deporting. A lot of them, we know over 1 million have already self-deported. And that's the best way, of course, to get the illegals out, because it's relatively safe and free for the American people if they self-deport, but combined with compulsory forced deportations, which are also necessary. It's been wonderful for American workers. But, we polled in Wisconsin, we specifically polled Trump voters because Wisconsin is sort of the consummate swing state. It was the closest of the 7 swing states, and it typically is. So we really wanted to know what's important to Trump voters there. And it was interesting, Sean, when we polled them and asked them what they admired about President Trump, why they voted for him, these Trump voters in the Badger State. Far and away, number one issue was immigration and sovereignty in a broad way. And Sean, nothing else was even close, okay, to the point where they didn't really even care that much about other issues. Like, other issues to them were negotiable. Things on the economy, things on pro-life, all of that was negotiable. The one that was not is immigration enforcement. And we're certainly seeing that in a broad sense, not just Trump voters. We're seeing now support for mass deportations. And again, I polled the whole country, not just Trump voters, polled the whole country. And I used the phrase mass deportations, and I did so on purpose because it's not a really kind phrase, right? It sounds kind of harsh. And frankly, I wasn't sure what kind of polling results we get. Well, we're getting in the 60s now. Overall, again, super majority of Americans who support mass deportations. If you throw in a criminal element, somebody who's committed a crime while they're in the United States, we shoot up into the 80s and even the 90s in terms of deportation. So the center has moved. Donald Trump, one of the most magnificent things he's done since he entered politics is on a couple of really key issues. He literally has moved the center of America. I think he definitely did it on China and our approach to China. I think he's definitely done on trade, and I think he's done on immigration. So, the center has moved. Now, that doesn't mean he can do anything, sort of, and have it be popular, but it means there's a lot of wiggle room on this topic, and that the administration, and there's a lot of different voices within the administration. There's a lot of fighting with internally, which is good. When I say fighting, I don't mean that in a negative sense. There's a lot of debate, a lot of different interests competing. There's more corporate type interests who want to take a softer approach. There's more law and order interests who want to get a lot harsher, which is certainly where I am as far as enforcement. But ultimately, I would suggest to the administration, always err toward the side of enforcement and toward the side of sovereignty. And by the way, you know who else has his back? Are legal immigrants. Donald Trump, we now know from the Pew survey, legal migrants voted for Trump in this election. That's incredible. Republicans never win legal immigrants to the United States. Donald Trump did. So people like my own father, who came to this country the right way, who know how difficult, how expensive, how time consuming it can be to become a legal American, they voted for the man who promised to deport the illegals,
right.
and they
well, they
voted for him
follow
in
that,
majority.
right, because they stood in line and did it the right way. And it's like,
Yeah.
I don't, you go to an amusement park or a restaurant and you see someone cut the line and you're like, excuse me. Like, I mean, I may do that from time to time on an off ramp, you know, but I know that I'm getting a lot of people giving me the finger and everything. Caroline, the one thing that I do think is interesting is when you ask people, I agree with Steve. I mean, Donald Trump has turned the volume up about the consequences of illegal immigration. But Jen pointed out that, you know, Brooke Rollins' issue is, hey, that's fine, but you have to understand the consequences at farms and other places, right? A lot of these workers are illegally here. And so there's going to be an economic impact. And I wonder how many people fully understand that. And because I think it's part of the debate. I feel like the same thing with China. As long as we understand that there's consequences, I'm willing to take them. But I feel like, you know, I don't want people using TikTok. I don't want to be relying on China, but it's the same thing with this. We need to be a country of law and order, but we also understand the consequences of doing that, you know, maybe in terms of the labor force.
Frankly, I do think it's a price that we have to pay, but really it's because you're thinking about the nation, not just limited industries. I'm going to sound like a friend of ours, Batia, for a second and just put on the sort of populist working hat. The problem with illegal labor flooding into the agricultural industry is that you are creating an underclass. You are suppressing the wages of Americans who might take those jobs because you are willing to pay pennies on the dollar to people who are so desperate that they will accept that very, very cheap pay, whatever it might be. So I understand that Brooke Rollins is facing a ton of pressure right now from the agricultural sector. The lobbying must be crazy. They must be fighting tooth and nail to keep their illegal labor. And I understand to Jen's point about the optics and the messaging, it's really key that Trump gets this right, because there are plenty of independents out there that probably see, oh, grandma's getting picked up from the side of a work site and being deported. That's inhumane. But, you know, again, it's not about one industry. We have to think about the whole national picture here. And what America First means is that we don't have a second class, an underclass of folks who would take pennies on the dollar when Americans might take those jobs. And so we have to, I think, rebut that right off the bat and say, it's not just about GDP, guys. It's about national sovereignty. And Jen also brought up amnesty, which made me think of how under the Reagan administration, we tout Reagan as like this conservative hero, which he was. However, I think sort of with the benefit of hindsight, and that being 2020, we look at the Immigration Reform and Control Act, which was known as IRCA, and the concessions that he made to get Democrats to vote for that bill. The first concession the first thing that he extracted as concession from Democrats was E-Verify, which was basically making employers verify that their workers on the farms were not illegal. They did not really implement that. That was a very shoddy job. Obviously E-Verify is barely used because we know that there's a ton of illegal labor in big ag. The other part of that was amnesty. Amnesty was a major concession of that bill. And as a result, Republicans, we lost a lot with that bill. It was supposed to be this great compromise and, we're going to secure the border. But even if there is like money for border enforcement, which that law allocated, you have added and you still have really not removed the incentive to come here, which is that people come here for economic reasons from Central America because they can get a job on farms, and you're really not penalizing employers enough for using that labor. You have to go to the source. So I actually think that Trump was right to do the worksite raids. Politically, his instincts were correct to do that. And I understand that he's dealing with so many different interest groups right now. I just don't think it was right. I think he's got to bring those back.
I think most Americans, they want to see the people that voted for President Trump want to see him take that hard line stance that Steve was mentioning, being really tough on law and order, tough on immigration, because that's what he promised on the campaign trail. We've been through 4 years of pain as it relates to our southern border. He stopped the bleeding, but to Caroline's point, there still is that incentive, and that's what needs to be taken care of if we want to ensure, again, we hope that we continue to have America First leaders in future elections, but if for some reason we don't, we want to make sure that we stop that incentive for people to keep coming across that border illegally.
Yeah, there's two things that I think are important in this debate. Well, number one, this false choice that, oh, we've got to give people a pathway to citizenship. No, absolutely. I don't understand that. To me, that is such a false choice, rewarding people who broke the law by saying, okay, well, at this point, the only solution is just to make you a citizen and allow you to vote. That is I don't understand how Republicans buy into this. Secondly, to Caroline's point, the thing that I find so fascinating, especially coming from the left, is we are basically saying we've got to take care of these people because who else is going to take the crappy wages to clean our houses and wash our cars? But these people, to your point, who are, we're going to basically say, hey, they're less of a person because we don't want real Americans having to do that and having to compete with them. So we'll let these other people, for a party that supposedly cares about working families, the Democrats and the left suck. I mean, the idea that they promote this is unbelievable. But I want to pivot, if I can, to the last big issue that I think seems to get a ton of attention this week on MAGA, Jeffrey Epstein. I am torn on this. I am not an Epstein guy. I will just say that flat out. I don't know if any of the three of you are, but like I follow it. I don't know. I mean, I've read enough stuff. I don't know about whether he killed himself or not. I do think there's a list. And I want to just play you. Alan Dershowitz was on this show a few weeks ago. And he, way before this was an issue, brought it up. And I want to play you what he said. Take a listen.
I have seen, remember, I was accused falsely on the Epstein, and ultimately I was completely cleared. The woman admitted that she may have mistook me for somebody else and withdrew all of her lawsuits. And so from day one, from the day I was accused, I said I want every document out because I knew every document would prove I was innocent. So let me tell you, I know for a fact documents are being suppressed, and they're being suppressed to protect individuals. I know the names of the individuals. I know why they're being suppressed. I know who's suppressing them, but I'm bound by confidentiality from a judge and cases, and I can't disclose what I know. But I hand to God, I know the names of people whose files are being suppressed in order to protect them, and that's wrong.
Steve Cortez, again, I don't know where you come down on this thing, but everything we know about Jeffrey Epstein is that he's a vindictive, manipulative guy who kept notes and things like that. Do you believe that that there's a list out there?
Oh, I certainly think there is. And listen, I think Alan Dershowitz has a lot of credibility, by the way, on this issue. And he's a Democrat. I wouldn't agree with him on a lot of partisan issues. But when it comes to law, I think he's very sound. The fact that he was personally accused and sued and vigorously defended himself and was ultimately exonerated, that he had not participated in any illegal or even immoral behavior at all, I think gives him a lot of credibility on this. And so when he tells us that, look, information is being suppressed, I take him seriously. I will tell you this, too. Like you, Sean, I'm not big into the Epstein issue, but a lot of people in my social and family circles are, okay? And within the MAGA world, I have to tell you, people are irate right now.
Who are they irate at, Steve? Who are they? Are they mad at Pam Bondi? Are they mad at Kash Patel? Or are they mad at Donald Trump?
All of the above. I think right now, mostly it's Pam Bondi. But I think the White House needs to recognize that there is a problem here, and this has not been handled correctly so far. And people who are extremely favorable toward Donald Trump, people are really, really angry about this issue. I don't know anyone who believes that we're being told the full truth. I don't know a single person who believes that we're being told the full truth. And that's a problem for an administration that people like me really, really back. So I don't think this is done. I don't think it's over by a long shot.
But is this an issue? Like I'll fall on my sword on immigration every day of the week. But I don't know that I care about. I mean, do you care about Jeffrey Epstein enough that
I don't? But I'm surprised how many people do.
Right.
I'm really surprised how many people who are very close to me, who I know super well, are willing to fall on the sword on this issue. It surprises me.
Yeah, there are a number. I mean, you look at some major influencers, Megyn Kelly, who came out, at the end of President Trump's campaign, endorsing him, also, throwing some criticism, saying, why aren't we hearing the truth here? And I think, you go back to what happened at the White House several months ago when a number of these influencers showed up receiving binders with redacted information. People wanted to know what was going on. It wasn't clear. And I think there's a lot of people, again, to Steve's point, that still feel like they're in the dark on this, that we're not getting the full truth. But again, just like the two of you, it's not something I have been hyped about. I'm more concerned about the issues that are facing us now that are going to be facing Americans in the future. This is something in our past, an awful dark past. I think people would love to know some answers, but at the same time, there are much bigger issues right now that are facing the American people.
Caroline, can I ask you a question? Play this scenario out for me. Let's just call it 100 people are on a list, right? And we know who they are. I mean, I mean, when I say this, I mean, they are prominent people. They are members, politicians. They are bankers and financiers and major donors. They are probably some people in the media. If you're Donald Trump and they go to you and say, Mr. President, there is a list. Here are the 150 people. By the way, none of them have been convicted of anything. There's just Epstein had this list. And so we have this list. If we release it, you know what's going to happen. They're going to be forced to resign. They'll be canceled, censored, etc., without due process because it was a list, and we know how America works. And Donald Trump looks down that list and says, hey, I know 75 of these guys. I know Bob Jones, and he's a good person, and I can't destroy their lives. Is that an acceptable, like, where I guess just play that scenario out for me and say, do you agree that that's worth in the public interest of protecting these people because they haven't been accused of anything? Or is it, as someone said on the morning meeting this morning, burn it all down?
Well, I think this is the rift within MAGA, right? Because by nature of Trump being a former extremely influential businessman, prominent reality TV star, celebrity, he totally did cross paths with a lot of these people. And I'm sure he still has behind the scenes friendly relationships with them. And he knows that, this could be probably a house of cards that comes tumbling down, but his base wanted an expose. And I have Gen Z brothers. We know that Gen Z men shifted dramatically right this past election. And I've been following where their heads are at on social media. It's a very interesting case study. Gen Z men, and I, as Gen Z myself, kind of conflate, because I have a superficial understanding of the Epstein case, but I conflate it with Diddy because to me it seems like a similar case of alleged, sexual abuse, and also this massive network of influential people in Hollywood and politics who were either complicit or, guilty by association, whatever it was. You see a lot of Gen Z guys saying, free Diddy, but then you see a lot of Gen Z guys saying, this is ridiculous that we don't know more about what Epstein did, or, the Lolita Express, or whatever it is. And I mean, Bill Clinton was certain, we believe that Bill Clinton was on the Lolita Express and all of that. But yeah, I think there's something to what you're saying, Sean, which is that, do we want to topple major, it could be major industries. It could be
oh my God, I don't think there's any question about it.
And this is a question of how deep is the deep state, right? Is the deep state beyond our wildest imagination? If this is CEOs, it's hard to know. And maybe the Trump administration just feels like it's not worth the fallout.
Yeah, I just, to me, I don't know. I'm glad I don't have to make that decision, but I got to imagine, to your point, there's a ton of CEOs sweating their butt off these days. Please don't give out that list. Please don't give out the list. Please don't. I mean, literally, because I think you're right. I mean, just the breadth and depth of the people that guy associated with. They have family foundations and CEOs. Anyway, we're at that point in the show on a Thursday where we go through and talk about who won and who lost. Jen Pellegrino, I'll start with you. Who do you think won the week?
Oh, gosh. Who won the week? Well, I think it's been the past couple of weeks now, but big winner is going to be the state of Florida. New York City going toward a likely socialist mayor. This is the direction the blue states want to go. It's driving a lot of people down to the sunshine state, even more that have traveled back down there in the last few years. You've got mayors of Florida saying, hey, come on down. We're a great place to live. A lot of prominent people moving down there. So I think Florida's the place to be, and they're a winner right now.
All right. Then who lost?
Come back to me on that one.
All right. Steve Cortez, tell me who you think won and lost.
You bet. So winner of the week is law enforcement and first responders in Texas who responded to that awful tragedy
great job.
with such heroism. And I want to specifically call out, because his interview really went viral, as it should, Scott Ruskin is his name. He was the swimmer for the Coast Guard who saved 165 people. What a hero. He was totally modest about it, as you might expect from somebody like that. But gosh, what a winner.
But somebody like that, man, the guy just enlisted. This was his first time. So when you say someone like that, you know who that is? That's an average American stepping up to do heroic things in the face of danger. And so, that's what I love about Scott Ruskin, is that it's not like some dude who was a SEAL that went through BUDS and is a bad You know,
Right.
it's like, this is just a good American man who did the right thing at the right time. And that speaks volumes to who we are as a people. Anyway, I love that.
So deserves all of our respect. Somebody who does not deserve our respect, my loser of the week, is John Brennan. Somebody who I believe belongs in handcuffs. Somebody who thankfully is being investigated again. He should be investigated for what I believe were crimes against this country, at least lies, possibly crimes against this country. Somebody who is constantly on the airwaves and touted as a supposed foreign policy expert. I think he is being outed, and he should be.
Good. Caroline Downey, bring it home.
Well, Steve stole mine. I was going to say Scott Ruskin because, I mean, that was his first Coast Guard mission. I don't think people understand that. I mean, this man just relied on his duty, his training, and it was sheer American heroism. And I guess.
By the way, can I just say this? If you think about the Army and the Air Force dropping the bomb, right, in Iran, the Navy firing the missiles from the sub, and the Coast Guard, which, by the way, is technically, in time of war, a division of the Navy, just getting that in there. This has been a great, and then the Army's 250. What a great couple weeks for our military. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Caroline, but I'm glad I'm just trying to give you a lifeline there.
Oh, no, fully agree. I think the loser, I mean, especially having friends who, just had children, and the Texas story has been so harrowing on so many levels for, I think, the whole country. It's unfathomable. It's hard to wrap your head around. And honestly, the losers are the ones politicizing it. Yes. Especially that one pediatrician, I believe, from Texas, who literally tweeted, and this would make us all concerned, the fact that we might be, sending off our kids to receive care that is less advanced than people who are Democrats because of their political views. But she basically said that people who are in Texas deserve to drown because it's a red state, and Trump allegedly,
her name, just so we call her out, her name is Dr. Christina Probst. She's a pediatrician at Bluefish Pediatrics in Houston.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we can call her out. Jen, do you have a loser?
Yeah, well, and there was another official as well who was, going the racist direction about it, saying, well, these are just young white Christian girls. This shouldn't matter. There have been all kinds of people politicizing this awful tragedy, and it's disgusting. That was my loser, Caroline. I came up with it on the fly because, Sean, it's been so long since you had me on. I forgot that we do winners and losers. But quick note, if I may, have to give a shout out to one of our dear friends, Jessie. She's behind the camera. Her son just joined the Coast Guard. Great to see,
very proud mom,
that young man being celebrated, because it's great for our military, great for recruitment, which is going well. So we love our Coast Guard.
All right, I'm going to be quick. I think the winner of the week so many of the other ones. So just to be clear, I agree with all of you, but I don't think he got the recognition he needed. Earlier this year, Newark Airport was an absolute disaster. Sean Duffy, the transportation secretary, did yeoman's work getting Newark up and running. Everything seems to be going well, and Duffy just chalks it up at another day of work. Good job, Secretary Sean Duffy, for what you're doing for this country. My loser of the week, M&M's and Skittles. Everybody else is getting rid of dyes. M&M's and Skittles says, no, we're going to keep them. You know what, guys? Get with the program. Get rid of your artificial dyes. We all know what they do. Get on board on the MAGA movement. Anyway, I love this panel. Thank you guys for being here. Guys, remember, we got a great show tomorrow. Victor Davis Hanson is here. Sign up for the free newsletter at SeanSpicer.com anytime, and we'll see you back here tomorrow. Thanks for being with us. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.